With the off-season news that teams will be limited to only 3 charters, we've seen every 4-car team in the NASCAR Cup Series minus the Joe Gibbs and Hendrick Motorsports clubs that are grandfathered in. So what I wanted to do today was take a look at all of them and look at which teams were able to go 4 for 4, 4 cars, 4 winners. So let's start all the way at the bottom. 1998 Roush Racing was the first team to ever field more than 3 full-time cars, and they didn't just expand to 4, they went straight to 5. Now they had a lot of struggles this year, notably Johnny Benson wasn't in the fast white car yet, so he failed to make the Daytona 500, and Chad Little, although he finished 15th in points, DNQ'd at the Spring Atlanta race. Mark Martin led the charge with 7 wins, and Jeff Burton also grabbed a couple wins with 2. In 2002, Hendrick Motorsports was the second organization to try out the 4-car team. They brought in some rookie named Jimmie Johnson. I wonder how that's going to play out for them, but it should be noted that Joe Nemechek took over for Jerry Nadeau after round 11 at Richmond. Nadeau was like 28th in points, but Nemechek also struggled to keep that car in the top 35, finishing the season just 34th in owner points, so barely locking himself into the first 5 races of 2003, but he did manage 2 second-place finishes late in the season. Jeff Gordon and Jimmie Johnson both won 3 races that year. In 2002, Roush Racing decided that 5 cars was too many and dropped themselves down to 4. They had a couple pretty good seasons though, Matt Kenseth with 5 wins, Kurt Busch coming into his own with 4 wins, and Mark Martin grabbing a win, but they didn't quite get the 4 drivers 4 wins, as Jeff Burton failed to win a race despite finishing a solid 12th in points. 2003 Hendrick Motorsports was the first team to have all 4 drivers win a race. Jeff Gordon won first, grabbing 3 wins. Joe Nemechek got a surprise win. Jimmie Johnson won twice, and Terry Labonte won his 22nd and final Winston Cup race at the Southern 500 at Darlington. This is notable because this was the same event that he took his first win at 23 years earlier in the 1980 running of the race. Roush said just kidding about 4 cars and went back to 5 cars for the 2003 season, bringing in Greg Biffle in the 16. Again, a couple of good seasons. Matt Kenseth won the 2003 Winston Cup Championship with 1 win, Kurt Busch grabbed 4 wins, and Greg Biffle won at Daytona in his rookie season. Again, Jeff Burton with no win but 12th in points, and Mark Martin didn't win with a 17th place points finish. Now, I'm not going to quite count this as 4 cars, 4 drivers, since technically Roush had 5 drivers to choose from, but in 2004, Roush had 4 different winners. Mark Martin got a win, Greg Biffle got 2, Matt Kenseth also with 2 wins, and Kurt Busch won the inaugural chase for the Nextel Cup, winning the 2004 Nextel Cup Series Championship with 3 wins. Young rookie Carl Edwards took over for Jeff Burton with 13 races left and got 5 top 10s, so he looked like he'd be a big contender in 2005. And that he did. In 2005, we had the perfect NASCAR season. 5 drivers, 5 different winners. This is the only time this has ever happened. Mark Martin with 1 win, Greg Biffle with a breakout season winning 6 races, Matt Kenseth with a win, Kurt Busch with 3 wins, and rookie Carl Edwards winning 4 races. All 5 of these cars made the 10-driver chase for the Nextel Cup. This was a super team, but it wasn't going to last for long. NASCAR announced that teams were going to be limited to 4 cars, but Roush Racing would be grandfathered in until at least 2009 because that's when all their sponsorship deals went. Can you believe that? We're in an age now where signing a primary sponsor for like 3 or 4 races is a big deal. These guys had their primary sponsors locked until 2009. 2006 was Hendrick Motorsports' second season, getting 4 cars, 4 winners. Kyle Busch got a win. Jeff Gordon got 2 wins. Jimmie Johnson won 5 races, including the Daytona 500, the All-Star race, and the 2006 Nextel Cup Championship. He just had a beautiful year. And of course, Brian Vickers with a dominating win at Talladega. There was no controversy. He just led the whole race straight up. 2007 season new addition to the board with Dale Earnhardt Incorporated running 4 cars. Mark Martin in the 0-1. He didn't run all the races, only 24. Martin Truex Jr. getting his first win at Dover. Dale Earnhardt Jr. didn't win but was 16th in points. And Paul Menard had 6 DNQs. I'm really not trying to be mean to Paul Menard. He didn't even have a top 10 this year. I did not have any other stats that I can put here. But this team was not intended to be a 4-car team. After round 19, Ginn Racing and DEI merged. Both were 3-car teams, so Ginn had Mark Martin, Joe Nemechek, and Sterling Marlin. So how did this work? Well, the 14 car's owner points, which was 30th, moved over to the 15 car, which was below the top 35, locking Paul Menard into every race. They must have saved big money there, and then Joe Nemechek and Sterling Marlin's teams folded. Back-to-back years for Hendrick Motorsports, getting 4 cars, 4 winners, and they actually had a driver change. Casey Mears took over for Brian Vickers in the 25 and won a fuel mileage call at the Coca-Cola 600. So how did everyone else do? Well, Kyle Busch got a win, the inaugural COT race at Bristol. Jeff Gordon got 6 wins, and then Jimmy Johnson with a 10-win season and the 2007 Nextel Cup Championship. 2007 Roush Racing once again went 4 for 5, but they had a couple different drivers in their lineup. So David Reagan took over for Mark Martin, who finally retired, but he didn't really retire. He just went over to Ginn Racing to run a reduced schedule. Greg Biffle got a win in the 16 that he probably shouldn't have won. It probably should be Clint Boyer's win, but that's a topic for another day. Jamie McMurray finally gets his first win for Roush, and his first since stepping in for Sterling Marlin in 2002 with a thriller at Daytona, and Carl Edwards with a steady 3 wins. 2008 was DEI's final year running 4 cars. Martin Truex Jr., 15th in points. Mark Martin with a very similar stat line to 2007, 11 top 5s and 24 starts. Paul Menard got a top 5 at Talladega, but Regan Smith won a race at Talladega. No, he really didn't. I mean, he got pushed below the line by Tony Stewart. I think everyone can admit that he probably should have won this race now, but that's the box NASCAR put them in with the call. I mean, I'm sure this situation is never going to happen again. Like, I doubt there's going to be another controversy with a car getting blocked, and, nothing's going to happen at the end of a Talladega race. 2009 Richard Childress Racing was the next team to give the old 4-car team a try. They brought in Casey Mears to replace Clint Bowyer in the 07. That was a really terrible decision, splitting up Clint Bowyer and Jack Daniels, but this was a disastrous season for Richard Childress Racing. I mean, their best car finished 15th in points. Nobody won a race. This was a massive fall off from where they were in 2008. The cars finished 4th, 5th, and 6th in points. Burton won 2 races. Bowyer won a race. It's just a massive fall off. So they only tried the 4-car team for 1 season. They ditched the 07 car after this season and just went back to the Bowyer, Harvick, Burton tandem for 2010. And surprise, all 3 cars made the chase again. Another team that got to 4 cars, but from the result of a merger in 2009, Casey Kane won 2 races while the rest of his teammates finished 20th in points. Elliott Sadler, Reed Sorensen in the 43, I don't really remember that, and AJ Allmendinger in the 24. So how did we get here with these guys? Well, Gillette Evernham Motorsports and Richard Petty Motorsports merged, but they just kept the Richard Petty Motorsports name. 2008 wasn't a really great year for anybody. I mean, Casey Kane missed the chase 15th in points. Patrick Carpentier, Gillette needed a Quebec driver in there, and then Elliott Sadler. Over at Richard Petty Motorsports, Bobby Labonte ran his last season for the team with a 22nd in points, and Kyle Petty drove like half the races. Chad McCumbee got in there for a little bit, but the car finished 41st in owners' points. This team was actually never supposed to be a 4-car team. It was originally announced that it was going to be a 4-car team with the 10 car instead of the 44, but due to funding, they weren't going to run the 10 car, and AJ Allmendinger was going to step in and replace Elliott Sadler for 2009, but that didn't go over well with Elliott Sadler, who had a contract until the end of 2010. There was a lawsuit, and 2 weeks later, magically, AJ Allmendinger was driving the 44 car, and Elliott Sadler was in the 19. The team ran it back with 4 drivers for 2010 with another merger coming into the fold. They dropped Reed Sorensen and moved AJ Allmendinger into the 43, and then took the dying 98 from Yates with Paul Menard, again saving big money. Paul Menard actually had a good season, finishing 23rd in points, AJ Allmendinger 19th, Casey Kane in 20th, and Elliott Sadler in 27th. Now this would be the last year that they would run this tandem, as Elliott Sadler would leave the team following 2010. Remember that blurb about Roush Fenway being grandfathered into 5 cars until 2009? Well, the 2009 season passed, and for 2010, Roush was back down to 4 cars. Now, Edwards, Biffle, and Kenseth finished 4th, 5th, and 6th in points respectively. Kenseth didn't get a win, where Biffle and Edwards got 2. Solid seasons for both of these guys, but David Reagan 24th in points. They had this lineup for 1 more year, and then after the 2011 season, they let David Reagan go his own way. It's been 5 years, but Hendrick Motorsports is back in the 4 Cars 4 Winners Club, this time with a little bit of a different driver lineup. So Casey Kane had moved over to the number 5 car. He got 2 wins. Jeff Gordon got 2 wins. Jimmy Johnson won 5 races. And Dale Earnhardt Jr. won a race, breaking a long winless streak. Great year for these guys. Same 4 drivers are going to run it back in 2014. Casey Kane with 1 win, Jeff Gordon with a great season towards the end of his career winning 4 races, Jimmy Johnson also with 4 wins, and Dale Earnhardt Jr. having a late career resurgence winning 4 races in 2014. This was fun to watch. If you saw it, Jr. coming back and being a contender was awesome. But that wasn't the biggest deal for 4-car teams in 2014. Stewart-Haas Racing joined the 4-car club, expanding and bringing in Kurt Busch into the fold in the 41 car. So how did these guys do? Well, Kevin Harvick, who had moved over from Richard Childress Racing in the offseason, won 5 races in the 2014 Sprint Cup Series Championship. Danica Patrick ran 28th in points, Tony Stewart ran 25th in points, and Kurt Busch won a race. He probably could have had another win earlier in the season, but NASCAR didn't really want him to win when there was some lawsuit controversy going on between him and his ex-girlfriend. Again, another story for another day. Joe Gibbs must have saw what Stewart-Haas Racing did in 2014 and realized they wanted a championship themselves, so they expanded, bringing in the 19 car for Carl Edwards. And as you can see there at the bottom, a couple of Roush Fenway guys had made their way over to Joe Gibbs Racing by this point. Anyways, in their first season with 4 cars, they joined the 4 Cars 4 Winners Club. Denny Hamlin with 2 wins, Kyle Busch winning 5 races in the 2015 Sprint Cup Series Championship despite only running 25 races after his Daytona broken leg. Carl Edwards won 2 races with his first season in Joe Gibbs equipment, and Matt Kenseth with 5 wins. 2016, they just carried on what they did in 2015. All 4 of these cars finished top 6 in points. They finished 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th respectively. Denny Hamlin won 2 races, Kyle Busch won 4, Carl Edwards with 3 races, and Matt Kenseth with 3 races. This is a dominant team. I can't imagine anything happening that's going to break this team up. I mean, they're going to just go into 2017 and keep rolling, right? 2018 was the only time Stewart-Haas Racing joined the 4 Cars 4 Winners Club. Kevin Harvick with a dominant season winning 8 races. Eric Almirola got a win of his own at Talladega, his first year in Stewart-Haas equipment. Clint Bowyer won 2 races. You know, he hadn't been a winner since his time at Michael Waltrip Racing. It was awesome to see him grab a couple more wins. And Kurt Busch was good for his usual 1-win season. 2019 Joe Gibbs was a different level of dominance. They won over half the races between 3 guys. Denny Hamlin with 6 wins, Kyle Busch with 5 wins in the 2019 Monster Energy NASCAR Cup Series Championship. Martin Truex Jr. won 7 races and finished second to Kyle Busch in points. And Eric Jones won a race at Darlington. It should be mentioned here that 3 of the 4 cars in the Final 4 were Gibbs cars, with Hamlin, Kyle Busch, and Martin Truex Jr. all making the championship race. 2 years later, they were right back at the 4 Cars 4 Winners Club, but this time they had Christopher Bell in the 20 car, who won in his 2nd race for JGR. Denny Hamlin with 2 wins, Kyle Busch won twice, and Martin Truex Jr. added 4 wins to Gibbs' total that season. But they weren't the only team to do it. This is the only time on this whole list that there were 2 teams who did it in the same year. 2021 Hendrick Motorsports also had 4 cars, 4 winners. Kyle Larson, in his first season in Hendrick equipment, won 10 races in the 2021 Cup Series Championship. This probably could have been closer to like 13 or 14 if things had gone a bit differently for him. Chase Elliott with 2 wins, William Byron won a race, and Alex Bowman had a shocking 4-win season. This was just a great year for Hendrick Motorsports. They would follow it up again the next season, the first one in the Gen 7 car. Kyle Larson with 3 wins, Chase Elliott with 5. He really came out of the gates in this new car. William Byron had 2 wins, and Alex Bowman won a race. So Hendrick Motorsports was the first team to do this in the Gen 7 era. And just last year, Hendrick Motorsports did it again. Kyle Larson won 6 races, Chase Elliott with 1 win, William Byron won 3 times, and Alex Bowman won a race. But that's not the biggest news surrounding 2024 4-car teams. Stewart-Haas Racing ran their last season as a 4-car team. Chase Briscoe won a race in the 14, but everyone else finished around 25th in points. Now, Haas factory team will still run the 41 car next year, but the 4, 10, and 14 charters were all sold off to the highest bidder. So, where does that leave us for this year? There are 2 4-car teams left. Hendrick Motorsports with Kyle Larson, Chase Elliott, William Byron, and Alex Bowman. And of course, Joe Gibbs Racing with Denny Hamlin, Chase Briscoe, Christopher Bell, and Ty Gibbs in the 54. I think both of these teams can continue adding to the list of 4 cars, 4 winners, but we'll have to see how things shake out. And you might think, oh, these teams are going to be here forever. That's what people probably thought about Roush when they were grandfathered in. So we'll keep an eye on making sure these cars stay as the final 4-car teams. So let's go back up here and look at our list of all the 4-car teams. That's a pretty big list, right? Well, here's a list of all the teams that managed 4 winners in a year. Pretty legendary list. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed.